Hark, noble listeners, and welcome, or should I say, greetings, gentlefolk of the digital realm, from this humble corner of what was once Wallachia, a land where even our mountains have seen a peculiar sort of high. Gather round, draw close to your glowing screens, for tonight we shall embark upon a most peculiar journey. Forget your worries of plagues and poor harvest for a moment, and let us delve into the truly bewildering question: what in the name of all that is holy, and occasionally quite unholy, was it like to get high in the tumultuous, often terrifying, but always fascinating times of the Middle Ages? All right, picture this. You've had a day. Your lords just raised taxes again. The Black Death is probably knocking on your neighbour's door, and your teeth feel like they're staging a revolt. Perhaps the local witch just gave your cow a suspicious look, or your beloved pig mysteriously developed a limp after she walked by. You just want to escape, right? Kick back, maybe watch some TikToks of dancing peasants, whatever your weary soul desires. But here's the kicker. It's the 14th century. No Netflix, no comfy couch, no craft beer, let alone a cannabis dispensary delivering to your hovel, whether you're in the muddy fields of England or the forested hills of Transylvania. So, how did our medieval ancestors get their chill on? Or, more accurately, how did they trip balls in a world where modern medicine was basically leeches and a prayer, and superstition often trumped science, often with terrifyingly psychedelic results? Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, prepare for a wild ride that might make you think twice about complaining about your Wi-Fi signal. And if you're a returning member of our historical fellowship, you know the drill. Before we plunge into the delightfully disturbing world of medieval mind alteration, do me a solid, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and for this one, I actually recommend dimming the lights. Get cozy. Maybe grab a cup of, well, anything not suspicious looking. Because what we're about to explore is less Netflix and chill and more noxious fumes and thrill. Settle in, because we're going on an expedition into the hazy, hallucinatory history of medieval highs. And believe me, it gets weird. The apothecary, your gateway to potential madness and medieval misadventure. You, a weary peasant, stumble into the local apothecary. It's not a welcoming sight. Forget quaint little shops with soothing teas and carefully arranged essential oils designed for your holistic well-being. Oh no, this is more akin to a forgotten corner of a mad alchemist's lab, mixed with the back room of a very unsanitary butcher shop, and perhaps a dash of a taxidermist's dusty workshop. The very air here is thick with a cloying, almost suffocating scent, a sickly sweet perfume desperately trying and failing to mask the underlying stench of decay, unwashed bodies, stale sweat, and something vaguely metallic, like old blood and rust. Cobwebs hang like forgotten dreams, thick and grey, coated in a fine dust of what exactly? Ground-up beetles? Dried newt eyes? Perhaps the shed skin of a particularly robust serpent, or the pulverized bones of a stray dog. You try not to breathe too deeply, lest you accidentally inhale a spore that turns you into a talking mushroom with an existential crisis, or worse, gives you a mysterious fever that only a perilous pilgrimage to a distant, barely authenticated relic can cure. This wasn't your friendly neighbourhood CVS, folks. This was where you went for your myriad ailments, from the mundane rash to the mysterious, falling sickness. It was also the go-to for your questionable love potions, your curses for troublesome neighbours who grazed their sheep on your land, and, if you knew the right whispers, your ticket to a different reality, a fleeting escape from the relentless grimness of medieval life. The apothecary himself, or herself, for cunning women often filled this role, was a figure of both respect and suspicion. Often a monk with access to ancient texts and cultivated herb gardens, a barber surgeon with more enthusiasm for bleeding than understanding of anatomy, or a travelling charlatan with a captivating spiel and a suitcase full of questionable powders, they held the keys to nature's more unconventional remedies. And trust me, they weren't always aiming for a pleasant buzz. Their goal was often cure or kill with very little in between, and a healthy dose of "we'll see what God wills." Precision dosing was a foreign concept, much like universal literacy or indoor plumbing. It was more about intuition, tradition, and perhaps a bit of prayer. Imagine the conversation, delivered in hushed tones, perhaps through a grimy curtain that barely conceals the shelves lined with bizarre concoctions. Good morrow, purveyor of potions. I seek solace from the torment of my existence. My back aches from the ceaseless ploughing. My spirit is low after last week's famine, and the bishop fined me for humming too loudly during Mass, claiming it was a demonic incantation. And they'd squint at you from the shadows, perhaps their eyes clouded by fumes or a lifetime of dubious concoctions, then perhaps hand you a small, grimy pouch filled with suspicious dried leaves and twigs and say, in a gravelly, knowing voice, "For you, my friend, a draught to make the demons dance, or perhaps simply to make you stop feeling anything at all." And you just have to trust them. After all, what else were you going to do? Complain to HR about the lack of safety regulations? Write a scathing Yelp review that no one could read? No, you take your questionable package, offer your few precious coins, and hope for the best. Sometimes that meant hoping to simply wake up in your own bed, perhaps with a slightly lighter purse and a very upset stomach. Other times it meant hoping to wake up as someone else entirely, perhaps a prosperous merchant or a noble lady, free from the stench and toil, or perhaps somewhere else entirely, a place described only in whispered legends. The very act of entering such a place was a gamble, a step into the unknown, where the line between healing and hexing, between divine intervention and diabolical trickery, was as thin as a cobweb, and often crossed with alarming ease. You were putting your body, your mind, and potentially your immortal soul into the hands of someone whose understanding of medicine was often based on ancient superstitions and the unpredictable power of nature. The Botanical Bad Trips, a perilous perambulation through the Garden of Madness. Our first real stop on this express train to Crazy Town, the kind of journey you definitely don't want to book again, is the sinisterly beautiful Deadly Nightshade, or Atropa Belladonna. Doesn't that name just roll off the tongue, hinting at gothic romance and forbidden desires, like something out of a medieval romance novel where everyone dies dramatically? Sounds romantic, right? Like a tragic heroine in a medieval ballad, beautiful but lethal? Wrong. This unassuming beauty, with its dark, gleaming berries that resemble tiny jewels and lush green leaves, was packing some serious psychoactive punch, derived from potent alkaloids like atropine, scopolamine, and hyoscyamine. These compounds act as anticholinergics, blocking certain neurotransmitters in the brain, leading to a profound disruption of normal mental function. A few berries ingested, a leaf chewed, or even merely touching the plant and then rubbing your eyes, and you're looking at a cascade of horrifying symptoms. A rapid, pounding heartbeat that feels like a war drum in your chest, pupils dilated to saucers allowing too much light in, blurred vision so severe you might as well be blind, intense and vivid hallucinations, extreme delirium, and even violent convulsions. You're not just seeing things, you are the things. You might see shimmering castles in the clouds made of spun sugar and starlight, or legions of mischievous imps meticulously dancing the jig on your ceiling, perhaps even attempting to draw your family crest with mud on your hovel walls, all while chanting nonsensical rhymes that echo in your skull. More likely, you're experiencing vivid, terrifying nightmares while fully awake, consumed by a profound sense of paranoia and disorientation. You might be convinced you're naked, running screaming through a muddy field, perhaps babbling about demonic pacts and celestial prophecies, and utterly convinced you're a badger on a spiritual quest to unearth the meaning of life, which, let's be honest, would probably be just as confusing and depressing in medieval times as it is today. Fun times, if fun means a terrifying psychosis that might end in cardiac arrest, or being dragged to the village square and burned at the stake for witchcraft after being found muttering obscenities to farm animals. And remember, there's no immediate care here, no emergency room or toxicology unit. If you start barking at the moon, foaming at the mouth, or speaking in tongues in a language no one understands, which is probably just gibberish, but who's to say for sure when dealing with the devil's influence? They might just decide you're possessed by a particularly unruly demon and call for an immediate exorcism, which frankly might be more unpleasant than the high itself, depending on your priest's enthusiasm for torment and his proficiency with holy water, blessed relics, and painful incantations. Your delirium might even be interpreted as confirmation of demonic possession, sealing your unfortunate fate. Then there's henbane, or Hyoscyamus niger. This unassuming little plant, often found unceremoniously growing in ditches and waste grounds, was a real overachiever in the world of medieval mind alteration. It contains similar tropane alkaloids to belladonna, though often in different proportions, leading to a slightly varied but no less harrowing experience. It was frequently used as a crude sleeping aid, because who needs peaceful sleep when you can hallucinate demons, or better yet, engage in lively debates with talking turnips about the merits of crop rotation, right? But it could also give you a delightful sensation of flying, or, profound paralysis, intense dizziness, a sensation of profound weightlessness, as if your very soul was detaching from your body and floating up to the thatched roof, perhaps to commune with the spiders and the forgotten ancestors. It was a common ingredient in medieval anesthetics, though anesthetic might be a generous term here. It was more of a delirium-inducing sedative. Imagine being operated on for a broken bone or a festering wound, perhaps a particularly nasty splinter that turned septic and required amputation, while experiencing vivid, terrifying dreams and being completely unable to move or speak, trapped within your own mind as a crude, rusty saw approaches your limb, or a cauterizing iron glows red hot, its heat radiating towards you. A medieval panic attack on steroids, folks, with a distinct possibility of dying from shock, infection, or sheer terror, long before the hallucinatory part even became a primary concern. The line between being healed and being eternally traumatized or outright killed was incredibly fine, a tightrope walked by both the patient and the healer, where the margin for error was non-existent. And let's not forget the granddaddy of them all, the infamous mandrake root, Mandragora officinarum. This plant held almost mythical status, whispered about in hushed tones in taverns and market squares, a legend born from its uncanny resemblance to a human figure. Shaped vaguely like a human, with forking roots that truly did resemble little bodies, complete with rudimentary limbs, it was rumoured to scream when pulled from the ground, a sound that would supposedly kill you on the spot or drive you mad with terror. So, first challenge, harvest it without instantly dying. Legend had it you'd tie a starving dog to it, and the dog's desperate struggle and death scream would be the one to release the root's grip on the earth, allowing you to collect it safely, albeit with a dead dog on your conscience. Morbid, utterly horrifying, and deeply unethical by modern standards, but practical, I suppose, if you had a surplus of dogs you didn't mind sacrificing for your esoteric botanical needs and believed in such omens. If you managed to acquire this mythical root, perhaps from a shady dealer at the village fair who claimed to have a death-proof method involving earplugs made of raven feathers and a very large sacred shovel, you'd then get a potent hallucinogen that causes intense visions, a profound feeling of unreality, and a complete loss of touch with your rather grim reality. Mandrake, like belladonna and henbane, contains tropane alkaloids, leading to similar anticholinergic effects, but often with a more profound sense of disorientation and dissociation. Imagine, you ingest this stuff, perhaps brewed into a tea that tastes like bitter earth and ancient secrets, or mixed into a paste for external application, and suddenly your scrawny, flea-bitten pig looks like it's wearing a tiny crown and eloquently lecturing you on the philosophical implications of feudalism and the impending doom of the potato famine, which, of course, was still centuries away. But why let facts get in the way of a good hallucination when your mind is actively constructing new realities? Or the village idiot, usually only capable of grunting and occasionally stealing chickens, starts reciting entire passages of Shakespeare in perfect iambic pentameter, despite Shakespeare not being born for another 2 centuries, leaving you utterly baffled as to whether you're mad, he's a prophet, or you've simply stumbled into a temporal anomaly. Or, far more likely and far less amusing, you're convinced the rats in your straw bed are actually tiny, malevolent demons gnawing on your immortal soul, their eyes glinting in the darkness, and your neighbour's mangy cat, usually just interested in scratching itself and shedding fur, is a witch's familiar spying on your every move, reporting back to its dark mistress about your unholy thoughts. Good luck explaining that to the priest when you finally come down from your metaphysical journey. He's already got his holy water, his book of exorcisms, and a very uncomfortable iron collar ready, just for you, and a surprisingly judgmental look on his face that clearly implies you deserved whatever demonic visions you experienced for dabbling in such forbidden remedies. The witch's brews and flying ointments, the gross and the gooey journey into nocturnal flight. But it wasn't just about munching on random plants, hoping for the best, or worst. Oh no, the medieval mind was far more creative, and frankly, a lot more disturbing. Enter the infamous flying ointments. Yes, those things witches supposedly rubbed on themselves before soaring through the night sky on broomsticks to join their dark Sabbaths, or maybe just to avoid the muddy, disease-ridden streets and the disapproving glares of their neighbours. The very idea sends a shiver down your spine, doesn't it? The imagery of cackling hags anointing themselves under the pale moonlight is deeply ingrained in our collective consciousness, a potent mix of fear and forbidden fantasy. But for many, especially the outcast and the desperate, it wasn't about malevolence. It was a desperate, primal attempt to escape the drudgery, the pain, and the unyielding realities of their impoverished lives, to transcend the earthly and touch the ethereal, or at least believe they did. You're cold, you're damp, you're probably hungry, and you want to transcend this miserable existence, if only for an hour or two. Perhaps you've heard whispers of old women in the woods, or solitary figures on the edge of the village who know how to unlock the secrets of the night, how to commune with unseen forces, how to slip the bonds of the physical world. So, with trepidation, you cautiously approach the local wise woman, or as the church might call her, the suspected witch, the very mention of whom could get you dragged before the local lord, or worse, burned at the stake. She eyes you shrewdly, her gaze piercing, her face lined with the wisdom of plants and perhaps a touch of madness. Then she hands you a small earthenware pot of greenish-black goo. The smell is indescribable. It's like rotten eggs mixed with old socks that have seen better centuries, stale breath, a hint of desperation, and perhaps a dash of bat guano or toad secretions for good measure. A truly pungent bouquet of dread and ancient, dangerous herbal knowledge, a scent that seems to cling to your very soul. You hesitate, your stomach churning, your rational mind screaming in protest. But your craving for escape overrides your gag reflex and your innate sense of self-preservation. You hesitantly rub it on your skin, perhaps on your armpits, your temples, or, as some notorious texts from later witch trials suggest, on more intimate areas, which supposedly enhance the flying sensation by allowing more direct absorption into the bloodstream, bypassing the digestive system's protective barriers. Immediately, a burning sensation spreads across your skin, then a chilling cold, then a profound numbness, a creeping detachment from your physical form. You feel light, unburdened, as if gravity itself is loosening its grip. The concoction often contained a terrifying cocktail of ingredients: belladonna, henbane, datura, also known as Jimson weed or thornapple, another potent hallucinogen causing intense delirium and visions, aconite, or monkshood, deadly in even small doses, leading to cardiac arrest and respiratory failure, yet somehow believed to contribute to the flying sensation, and terrifyingly, animal fat. Yes, animal fat, rendered down from pigs, goats, or even sometimes human cadavers, though this was more rumour than common practice, thankfully, a sensationalist detail added by accusers, made the mixture absorbable through the skin, allowing for a transdermal delivery of these potent alkaloids directly into your bloodstream with unpredictable speed and intensity, because nothing says magical journey like a bit of rendered pig grease, or, if you believed the sensationalist propaganda of the witch hunters and torturers, the fat of an unbaptized child, though that's more in the realm of fear-mongering and less actual recipe, thankfully. But it paints a grim picture of the anxieties and dark beliefs of the age. Now, were they actually flying? Highly unlikely unless you count a vivid, profound hallucination of being airborne as flying. More likely, they were experiencing extreme delirium, a distorted body image, The sensation of shrinking or elongating limbs was common, a truly unsettling experience, and a terrifying sense of falling or floating uncontrollably, perhaps spinning wildly through a perceived void or tumbling endlessly through the stars. Imagine the psychological terror of feeling your body lift and spin, to be utterly unable to control it, hurtling through an imagined landscape of devils or angels. Imagine waking up hours later, perhaps disoriented and bruised in a muddy ditch by the forest's edge, covered in this foul-smelling grease, your clothes askew, perhaps a few teeth missing from grinding your jaw, with an inexplicable craving for acorns and a profound conviction that you just had a rendezvous with a goblin king who demanded you dance the jig, or perhaps signed a demonic contract in your own blood, or perhaps even consorted with succubi and incubi, their ghostly forms lingering in your memory. The hangover would be brutal, a pounding headache combined with profound nausea, extreme disorientation, and a lingering sense of unreality that blurred the lines between dream and waking. The shame, eternal, if you were even coherent enough to feel it. And the villagers, well, they'd probably already spotted you muttering to yourself in the field, half naked, covered in foul-smelling goop, and decided you were definitely in league with the devil, or at least a very messy drunk who had a disturbing encounter with a badger and lost a bet. Good luck explaining that to the local priest and his zealous inquisitors. They'd have the ducking stool and the kindling ready for you by sunset, and a crowd eager for entertainment and reassurance that divine order was being upheld. These ointments illustrate a fascinating point. The perceived experience was so powerful, so real, that it fueled centuries of folklore and belief in witchcraft. It wasn't just stories. People genuinely believed they had flown, transformed into animals, communed with spirits, or attended otherworldly gatherings. Their bodies and minds, under the influence of these potent, dangerous compounds, truly told them they had. The hallucinations were so vivid and immersive that they became indistinguishable from reality, cementing beliefs that would lead to countless tragic trials and executions across Europe, a dark chapter in human history fueled, in part, by misunderstood pharmacology and deeply entrenched fears. Opium and the monk's secret stash, the softer side of substance use in a hard world. Now, not everything was a one-way ticket to Nightmareville, or a public accusation of devilry leading to a rather unpleasant execution. There was a more gentle escape, if you will, the kind of high that didn't involve conversations with imaginary badgers or questionable anointing, but rather a quiet, almost sacred reprieve from pain and the relentless weight of existence. I'm talking about opium. Yes, the same stuff that got many a Victorian poet into trouble, inspiring epic poems and tragic lives, and still causes significant issues today. But in medieval times, before the mass industrialization of pharmaceuticals, opium was widely known as poppy juice, or tears of the poppy. It was cultivated and harvested, especially in the Near East and parts of Asia, but its medicinal properties were well understood and utilized across Europe, reaching even the furthest corners of our continent, including the monasteries of Romania, where monks often served as the primary healers. It was prized for its pain-relieving properties, its ability to induce profound sleep, and, naturally, its capacity to make you feel rather floaty, blissful, and utterly detached from the harsh realities of your existence. You've got a toothache so bad you're convinced a demon is nesting in your molar, gnawing away at your sanity with tiny ethereal chisels, making you wish for the sweet release of death itself. Or perhaps you're a monk, tired of endless chanting, rigid monastic discipline, the gnawing cold of the cloister in winter, and bland gruel that tastes suspiciously like boiled leather and existential despair, your spiritual journey punctuated by constant physical discomfort. You've heard whispers of the sleepy plant from travelling merchants who pass through your monastery gates, or from fellow monks who've seen service in more exotic lands during the Crusades, bringing back strange knowledge of Eastern remedies. A small dose of opium, often in the form of laudanum, opium dissolved in alcohol, a preparation often attributed to Paracelsus much later, but simpler water infusions of poppy heads and sap were certainly common, perhaps even dried and smoked in pipes. and suddenly the monotonous chanting of matins or vespers sounds like a heavenly choir, each note a balm to your weary soul, swelling with an unexpected beauty. The bland gruel tastes like manna from heaven, or at least something tolerable and perhaps even mildly delicious, a feast for the senses in your altered state. And that pesky demon in your tooth decides to take a much-needed vacation to the land of blissful oblivion, leaving you in a state of serene calm, a peace you haven't known in years. Opium was widely accepted in medieval medicine, a valuable component of the limited pharmacopoeia available. It was a precious commodity, often reserved for those who could afford it, or those whose suffering was deemed most dire, like dying lords or wounded knights returning from battle, or even used in crude surgical procedures to dull the agony. It was found in monasteries, aristocratic households, and apothecaries alike, passed down through texts and oral tradition. It was used for everything from treating insomnia and calming agitated patients to alleviating the agonizing pain of childbirth, battle wounds, or terminal illnesses like the plague, offering a rare moment of peace in a world where pain was an inescapable constant. But let's be real, a weary monk after a particularly trying day, perhaps having spent hours illuminating manuscripts by candlelight until his eyes ached, enduring a particularly lengthy sermon from a droning abbot, or simply grappling with the profound loneliness and spiritual anxieties of his vows, might have found more than just pain relief in its milky embrace. It offered a profound sense of peace, a quiet detachment from the relentless harshness and spiritual anxieties of medieval life, and a serene, dreamlike state, often accompanied by vivid, pleasant dreams. It was a truly rare commodity, a reliable escape from suffering, in an age defined by hardship, disease, and constant struggle. It offered not a chaotic trip, but a serene, if fleeting, escape, albeit with all the risks of addiction, dependency, and accidental overdose that come with opiates, risks they couldn't possibly understand with their limited medical knowledge. Medieval people may not have understood the pharmacology, the complex chemical interactions within the brain, or the long-term effects of addiction, but they certainly understood the escape, the blessed relief it provided, and for many, that was all that mattered. The pursuit of even a temporary peace in a world so often devoid of it was a powerful motivator, a testament to the human spirit's yearning for solace in the face of insurmountable suffering. It provided a glimpse of heaven, or at least a temporary reprieve from hell. Accidental trips, the terrors of ergot and the dancing plague. But not all medieval highs were intentional, sought out in dark apothecaries or quiet monasteries. Sometimes the trip came to you, whether you wanted it or not, creeping insidiously into your very sustenance, a silent, fungal assassin waiting in your daily bread. And often it came with agonizing pain, grotesque disfigurement, and mass hysteria that swept through entire communities, turning festive gatherings into scenes of collective, horrifying madness. I'm talking about ergot. Imagine this. You're just trying to eat your daily rye bread, the coarse, dark staple of your meagre diet, perhaps the only thing standing between you and starvation. It's often gritty from the rudimentary grinding stone, sometimes even mixed with undesirable plant matter, and it's likely your main source of calories, providing the raw fuel for your endless days of toil in the fields. But unbeknownst to you, the rye grain from which your bread was baked is infected with a parasitic fungus, Claviceps purpurea, commonly known as ergot. This insidious fungus, a purplish-black growth that resembles a rat's dropping or a miniature raven's claw, thrives in damp, cool conditions, often appearing after a wet harvest season, when grain is improperly dried or stored in dark, damp granaries. It's a natural source of potent psychoactive alkaloids, including lysergic acid derivatives, the chemical precursors to LSD, long before anyone even conceived of synthetic psychedelics. You eat the bread, perhaps feeling a strange tingling in your mouth, a subtle unease, a slight metallic aftertaste, or a burning sensation. Then slowly, terrifyingly, your limbs start twitching uncontrollably. Then your neighbor's limbs start twitching. Soon, the entire village is dancing, not with joy or revelry, but with agonizing spasms, screaming in terror, foaming at the mouth, writhing on the ground, consumed by an invisible force that compels them to move relentlessly. They're convinced they're being pursued by invisible demons, or that a searing internal fire is consuming their very souls, burning them from the inside out, turning their blood to molten lead. This wasn't a party, folks. This was St. Anthony's fire, or ergotism, a nightmare made real by a microscopic adversary. The symptoms were horrific and multifaceted, often leading to gruesome outcomes that medieval doctors could only attribute to divine punishment or demonic possession. The alkaloids in ergot cause severe vasoconstriction, meaning your blood vessels narrow dramatically, cutting off blood supply to the extremities. This leads to excruciating burning pain in the limbs, a sensation of fire coursing through your veins, as if hot coals were laid on your skin, followed by numbness, tingling, and eventually dry gangrene, where the affected limbs turn black, shrivel, and literally fall off, often without any other external injury. Imagine the sheer horror of waking to find your fingers or toes simply detached from your body, lying next to you, a chilling testament to the unseen poison within, leaving you disfigured and dependent on others for survival. Simultaneously, the psychoactive properties induce intense seizures, violent convulsions, profound delirium, extreme paranoia, and vivid, often terrifying hallucinations. People would tear at their own flesh, shriek in terror, babble incoherently, and be consumed by mass hysteria that would spread like wildfire through a community that lacked any understanding of germ theory or toxicology. Entire villages could succumb to this agonizing collective madness, with few surviving unscathed. The infamous dancing plague of 1518 in Strasbourg, France, is one of the most chilling and well-documented examples of this devastating affliction. It began with a single woman named Frau Trophea, who simply began to dance uncontrollably in the street, for no apparent reason other than an irresistible, agonizing compulsion that seized her body. Within days, dozens joined her. Within weeks, hundreds were caught in this horrifying epidemic of movement, a macabre ballet of involuntary spasms. They danced themselves to exhaustion, collapse, and even death from heart attacks, strokes, or sheer physical collapse, all under the scorching summer sun, their feet bloody and torn, their bodies racked with unbearable cramps. The local authorities, utterly bewildered by this inexplicable phenomenon, and believing it was a hot blood disease that needed to be expelled through physical exertion, actually encouraged the dancing. They set up stages, provided food, and even hired musicians to keep the afflicted moving, mistakenly thinking it would cure the affliction. Imagine that. Your city's official response to a mass psychological and physical breakdown is to provide a sound system for a forced, agonizing rave that's literally killing people in front of your eyes. It sounds utterly absurd to us, a scene plucked from a dark comedy, but for them it was a very real, very terrifying event, a collective madness that consumed an entire community, turning a city into a living theatre of human suffering and death. It is widely believed that this was a mass outbreak of ergotism, a horrifying accidental high that turned an entire city into a living nightmare, where the very bread meant to sustain life brought instead a terrifying, dance-driven death, a grim reminder of how precarious life was when nature's subtle poisons were misunderstood. So, next time you complain about your gluten intolerance, or even a bad batch of artisanal rye bread from the local market, remember, at least your bread isn't trying to make you dance yourself into an early grave while seeing shadowy figures whispering terrible secrets from the corners of your mind, a fate far worse than any modern food poisoning or allergic reaction. The medieval mindset, belief, superstition, and the unseen forces that guided their trips. It's crucial to fully grasp the medieval mindset when considering these highs. This was a world utterly steeped in superstition, deep religious belief, and a profound lack of scientific understanding regarding the natural world and human physiology. The universe was not a predictable machine operating on discoverable laws. It was a vast, mysterious tapestry woven with divine will, demonic influence, and the subtle, often malevolent energies of the cosmos. Every unexplained event, every illness, every strange sensation was attributed to supernatural forces. When someone experienced a powerful hallucination, they didn't think, "Oh, perhaps I've ingested a psychoactive alkaloid that's messing with my neurotransmitters and causing a temporary disruption in my perception." No, that kind of logical scientific thinking was centuries away, confined to the distant whispers of future enlightenment. Instead, they interpreted these experiences through the immediate, visceral lens of their worldview, a worldview where magic was real, miracles were commonplace, and the devil was a very tangible, active presence in daily life, constantly seeking to ensnare human souls. If you soared through the night on a flying ointment, it wasn't a hallucination. It was a genuine out-of-body experience, a spiritual journey, and a terrifying confirmation that you had indeed communed with dark forces, perhaps even flown to a witch's sabbath in a secluded forest clearing, where unholy rituals took place under the watchful eye of the devil himself. The sensory experience was so compelling, so visceral, that it confirmed existing beliefs, cementing them deeper into the psyche and solidifying the narratives of witchcraft and demonic pacts. If you saw monstrous beasts after ingesting belladonna, they were not mere figments of your imagination. They were real demons actively trying to snatch your soul, whispering temptations or threats into your ear, urging you towards damnation or dragging you into the pits of hell. This belief system undoubtedly amplified the psychological impact of these substances, making the trip far more profound, terrifying, and existentially significant than a modern person might experience, even with the exact same compounds. The very air, the very shadows, the very rustling of leaves in the wind were alive with spirits, both good and evil, and a trip on a medieval hallucinogen simply ripped the veil away, exposing a reality they already believed existed, making it terrifyingly manifest and undeniable. There was no scientific explanation to ground them, no rational framework to dismiss the visions as mere chemical reactions, no concept of brain chemistry. Every altered perception was a sign, a message, a divine revelation, a demonic torment, or a confrontation with the divine or the demonic, a struggle for one's eternal fate. This added a layer of profound psychological weight to every experience, turning what might be a fleeting discomfort today into a terrifying battle for one's immortal soul, often played out in the horrifying privacy of their own minds, but with very public and often fatal consequences. The Church actively combated such deviations, seeking to explain them through theology or eradicate them through brutal suppression. This inherent framework of belief meant that for medieval people, the high wasn't just a physical or mental alteration, but a direct encounter with the forces of good and evil that shaped their entire cosmos. Conclusion: a farewell to medieval mindbenders and a reflection on modern comforts. So, there you have it, noble listeners, a deep dive into the fascinating, frightening, and often grim world of getting high in medieval times. It wasn't exactly a chill evening with your buddies, a bag of chips, and some questionable streaming content. It was a terrifying, unpredictable, and often dangerous gamble with your sanity, your physical well-being, and potentially your immortal soul. From running naked through fields convinced you're a badger on a divine mission, to dancing uncontrollably until your feet bled from a rogue fungus consuming your very flesh, to having a surprisingly chill time thanks to a monk's secret stash of poppy juice. The medieval experience of altered states was wild, messy, and utterly fascinating. It speaks volumes about humanity's enduring desire for altered consciousness, even when the means to achieve it were perilous, misunderstood, and laden with the risk of eternal damnation. It makes you appreciate modern pharmacology, doesn't it? Or at least the fact that your biggest concern after a bad trip is usually just an empty fridge, a mild existential crisis, and the lingering regret of that awful karaoke performance from last night. Our medieval ancestors didn't have the luxury of calling an Uber to escape a terrifying hallucination, or ordering a pizza when the munchies hit, or seeking professional help for their psychological distress. They just had to ride it out, often alone, often in a world that already felt like a perpetual bad trip, even without the hallucinogenic bread or the demonic visions induced by belladonna. They simply endured, and perhaps occasionally glimpsed another, stranger reality that confirmed their deepest fears or most fervent hopes, and then they woke up to the same hard life, perhaps a little more scarred, a little more pious, or a little more insane. Their attempts to alter their consciousness reveal not only a universal human drive, but also the immense gap in understanding between their world and ours. What do you guys think? If you lived in the Middle Ages facing the grim realities of daily life, the constant threat of plague, famine, and arbitrary feudal lords, would you have dared to try any of these medieval mind-benders? Perhaps for a nagging toothache, for a divine vision to guide your path, or just for a moment's blessed escape from the sheer grind and drudgery of daily life? Let me know in the comments below. Have you heard any other bizarre medieval remedies or fascinating tales of altered states from this dark and curious period? Share them, and if you enjoyed this hour-plus journey into the bizarre and often gross history of getting high, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your equally disturbed friends, and subscribe for more historical deep dives that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about the past. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. May your bread be free of fungi and your dreams be free of dancing demons. And remember, sometimes the best way to get high is just a good, long sleep, preferably one that doesn't involve witches' ointments or spontaneous, deadly choreography.